Thank you. Tonight we'll be reading step 6 and 7, starting on page 76 of the fourth edition of the Big Book. After the speaker is finished, we'll open the meeting up for sharing. So I will now turn our meeting over to Chad. Thanks for coming, Chad. The meeting's yours.
Steve, I know you already told me this, but tell me again about what time that I would normally go to.
People have gone as late as 8:30. You got plenty of time. If you wrap it up a little earlier, you go a little bit over is fine. But we'll try to leave a little bit of time for sharing at the end.
I was a little concerned about not having enough material on 6 and 7, which usually means I'm about to go way over. My name's Chad Payne. I'm alcoholic. Been sober since April 2nd of 2003. And thanks, Steve, for asking me. I'm sure grateful to be here. I did a talk on 6 and 7 through an interpreter in Russia not long ago. And while I was doing it, I thought, I don't know which one's tougher, doing a talk on 6 and 7 or interpreting a talk on 6 and 7 into another language. I mean, there's some, it's not just real simple, straightforward ideas that we're getting across in these steps, and to put these steps into words is kind of challenging because it's kind of like describing God in words. Words just a little bit limited when we're talking about things like this, spiritual things like this. Before I get started, though, I want to invite everybody to my home group. I don't just tell you what my home group is. I try to get you to come, but my home group's the Primary Purpose Group, and we meet on Zoom on Wednesday nights at 7:30 Central Time, and I'll put that information in the chat when I get done, how to get there. And we're a big book study. We study the book really slowly, line by line, and we actually just discuss what the book says and try to keep our experience out of it. So it's a very different kind of meeting. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but I sure recommend that everybody check it out at least once. We're getting 400 or 500 people in there to study the book with us from all over the world. So that's been really cool. So Steve and I talked about this a little bit. If you're doing a talk on 4 and 5, which I assume the last speaker probably did 4 and 5, it's really hard. There's so much information in 4 and 5, in my experience, that by the time I get to the hour at the end of the 5th step, if I have any time left, it's not much time. So I'm going to start with that. And to me, that hour in 6 and 7 really kind of go together. So that hour, it starts on the bottom of page 75. It says, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. So what am I returning home from? I've just sit down and read my inventory to my sponsor or to someone, hopefully someone in AA. And now I'm going to go home. And the 5th step says that we admitted these things to another person, to ourselves, another person, and God. And to me, that this is where I go home now and admit this stuff to God. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. So I'm going to go home and set a timer for an hour and get quiet, a place where I don't have distraction. And maybe it's not home, maybe it's somewhere else, but wherever it is, it's a place where I don't have a lot of distraction. And I think of it as a meditation. Meditation is such a broad concept. There's so many different kinds of meditation, but when this book was written, meditate meant to contemplate or reflect, or consider something carefully. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. It's a meditation. And a lot of us have this experience where it's like, what am I going to do for an hour? Like a full hour. Like one time I listened to a guy's 4th step and I told him, you know what? We don't have to stick to, I listened to his 5th step. I said, we don't have to stick to the timer. He had done them before, had some time before, this wasn't his first 5th step. And I said, just go however long it goes. Let's just see how it goes. Give me a call when you're done and let me know how it went. I wasn't even home yet. We had done it at his apartment. I wasn't even home yet. 10 minutes later, he calls me, goes, it went great. I was like, what? You're already done? I mean, come on. But I think for a lot of us, looking at these instructions and following these instructions, we can fly through this pretty fast. So what do we really do in this hour? And one of my first experiences with really seeing how deep you can go in this thing was a talk Mark Houston did with us at Charlie's house around the table. And we have actually, I think Tony's on here. Tony, a couple guys in our crew took this recording and kind of cleaned it up. And it's a really powerful talk on that hour, and it really blew my mind. All the stuff that all the depth that he got out of it, and the more I do this, the more depth that I get out of this process. But it says here, we carefully review what we have done. So now I'm gonna go back to this and take a look at what I've done here, and what I want to pay special attention to is the exact nature of my wrongs, also called my defects or my shortcomings, or where I'm at fault, my mistakes, my old ideas, manifestations of self, however you want to put it. I want to really take a look at what's come out of this inventory, what's come out of this new awareness. And I like to make a list and jot some things down. This is what I really want to take out of this. Now, in a first, fourth step, that's a lot. It's a lot of stuff, and I don't expect a guy to get everything to take into 6 and 7. And when I continue to do inventory, when I read a piece of resentment inventory or a couple of fears or whatever, and come out of that, I want a list of maybe 4 or 5 things, that I really want to focus on here that I'm taking to God. And in my experience, whether I'm listening to someone's or I'm doing it myself, those become pretty clear somewhere in that process of the 5th step. It becomes pretty clear. This is what keeps showing up. This is what we really get down to. This is the stuff that's eating my lunch. This is the stuff that's causing a lot of harm to the people who love me the most, and things like that. So I want to kind of get a list of that. And it says here, after that, we thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know him better. And that's an interesting statement, because in my experience, I just spent 3 hours talking about me and how much the way that I do things doesn't work. What do you mean that I know God better? And there's a quote that says something about know me better, know God better. And when I really get down to what it is that's blocking me and start to get free of some of that stuff, I begin to have an experience. I begin to experience that flow of God consciousness. So when it says we know God better, I'm not talking about I can tell you the history or facts about God. I'm talking about knowing God not on an intellectual level, but from the heart. Knowing God from the heart, having an experience with God, experiencing God consciousness. And that's something to be grateful for. This inventory process is not something to dread, to be afraid of, to avoid at all costs. This is always good. I've never come out of the other side of doing steps 4 through 9 without changing for the better. And I've definitely never come out of it and changed for the worse. It's always an opportunity to grow and gain some freedom in the process, and then become more useful, which, if I forget to throw that in here somewhere, that's always the ultimate goal, is to get myself in a position to be useful, to do the actual work. This is not the work. And I say that a lot. I say doing the work, and I mean working the steps, writing inventory and praying and meditating and making amends and all that stuff. But really, the way that I read the book is that's not the work. The work is working with others. Everything else in this process is to put myself in a position, or to fit myself to be of maximum service to God and the people around me. And if I keep that as my main goal, as a side effect or a byproduct, I experience a lot of personal freedom. But I need to remember that that's not the main purpose here. The main purpose is to put myself in a position to be useful, to be of service. So I want to keep that grateful attitude through this process, knowing that there's no greater gift than to experience God, to wake up spiritually. So then it says, taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page. I don't really know why your book would be on the shelf if you just did a fifth step, but we're going to, I mean, when they wrote the book, they didn't even have a book. So, sometimes you got, okay. Anyway, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything. So this is a lot of what that meeting that Mark did was about that blew my mind. And I talked about it a little bit when we were at this part at Primary Purpose Group. Katie asked me if I could talk about what Mark had talked about in that talk he did a little bit. And I tried, and people asked about it. And I put together a list of things to kind of look at. But if I'm really looking at what he talked about, the first 5 steps, and with all their implications, is that the word? I can't remember exactly. But everything that these first 5 steps, what's the content here? What's this really telling me? What's it really asking me? What do I understand now that I didn't understand before? It's things like this. Am I clear that I have little to no control over how much alcohol I put in my body once I start to drink? Am I clear that I have a mental condition that also makes me powerless over the first drink? Do I understand that the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of no avail, that I suffer from a hopeless condition of mind and body, and that self-knowledge won't keep me sober? Am I clear that the solution to alcoholism is a spiritual experience? And as an alcoholic, I only have 2 alternatives: die an alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis. Am I willing to lay aside prejudice and open my mind to what spiritual terms truly mean to me? Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, there's a power greater than myself? Do I believe I can and will recover if I completely give myself to this program? Am I willing to go to any length to have a spiritual awakening? Am I ready to let go of my old ideas so I can have a new experience? Am I convinced that my life run on self-will can hardly be a success? Do I see my basic trouble, that I'm a self-seeker, even when trying to be kind? Do I see trying to manage this world won't bring me happiness and satisfaction? Am I clear that selfishness, self-centeredness, that's the root of my troubles? Am I clear that my troubles are basically of my own making, that above everything, I must be rid of this selfishness or it kills me? Do I understand that I can't get free of self without God's help? Am I truly ready to quit playing God? Have I faced and am I ready to be rid of what's blocking me from a spiritual awakening? Have I been thorough in my inventory? Have I been honest and told my secrets, withholding nothing? I want to consider each of those questions of that nature, the things that I'm taking this stuff from these previous steps into step 6. He said that I'm bringing the consciousness of the previous step into the consciousness of the step that I'm at now, so that I'm prepared to move on. So that really opened that up for me when he talked about that. To say opened it up for me is an understatement. It blew my mind. I'm just sitting there going, what? And like Charlie's sitting on one end of the table and Mark's sitting on the other end, and Mark's spouting this stuff off so fast. And I'm just like I need like a minute to process each sentence, and he's just going and going. And I'm like looking at Mark and looking at Charlie, you getting this? And just thankful we had, there's no way I was going to take notes on it, and just thankful we had it recorded. But anyway, it really opened that up and gave it a whole new meaning. So when we get into 6 and 7, then, let me read the rest of this. It says, for we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? There's some references here that are kind of interesting. I don't get a lot of use out of them, but just for the big book nerds in the room, there's some interesting references here. It talks about the foundation here, and Bill talks about a foundation of complete willingness on page 12. And then it says something about the cement, and they talk about that in the beginning of there's a solution on page 17, the cement that holds us together, this common peril, common solution. This cornerstone is mentioned here. It's on page 47, where you talk about a cornerstone of belief or willingness to believe. And then the keystone, that's on page 62. It talks about the keystone to this arch through which we pass to freedom. This idea of to quit playing God, and this relationship with God that it talks about, where God's the director, I'm the actor, God's the father, I'm the child, God's the principal, I'm the agent. So there's a lot of references there. So what he's really getting at here is, are we really ready to move into this next big surrender? Because that's what's coming up. Because 6 and 7, when we get into this, it's like now I'm really taking the third step. Last time I took the third step, we were talking about common manifestations of self. We were talking about what an extreme example of self-will run riot looks like in general. Now we're talking about me specifically. Now I have new awareness. My buddy Mike Lorenz calls it the 6 and 7 are like the third step with teeth. Now it's got some real meaning behind it. Now I'm aware of how I show up, how I act in self-will. And it's disturbing. It's always disturbing. Anytime I go through this process, I come out the other side going, man, wow. It's peeling those layers, right? And getting down to what I really believe deep down that limits me. What I really believe deep down that makes up this spiritual malady, and how I act based on that and the effect that it has on other people. And it's always disturbing. It's this step, these steps come after 4 and 5. It would be really cool if I could skip 4 and 5, not have to do the awareness, and just go to God and say, God, I got a lot of stuff that's not working. I'd like for you to take all that away from me. That'd be really cool. But that's not how it works. I have to become aware of it. I can't surrender what I don't see. As long as I'm asleep to it, I'm going to hold on to it, because I'm running on programs that I'm not even aware of. I know something needs to change, but I don't know what needs to change. Now I don't have to figure out how to change it. I just have to be aware of what it is that's not working. And that's why these steps are laid out in the order that they're in. I personally like for the guys that I work with to be specific here. I know that a lot of people, and I'm not saying this is wrong, I'm just putting out here the way that I do it. And the way that I do it is not the perfect way, and there's lots of ways to do this. But I like for the guys that I work with to be specific when we're looking at character defects. I'm not a big fan of the one-word defects. The first time I worked the steps, I went into step 6 with this long list of one-word defects. Things like pride and selfishness and dishonesty and laziness and procrastination and perfectionism and all this stuff. And it just didn't have a whole lot of meaning to me. It's like that wasn't really new information. For instance, I would rather a guy, instead of going into step 6 with the word rage, I would rather him go into step 6 with this written down. I throw a fit in front of my wife to intimidate her so that I can avoid looking at the real issue. Now, doesn't that have a little bit more meat on it? Isn't that a little bit more awareness than just going in and saying, I get into rage? And that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for. That's the kind of awareness that I want to get a hold of in this process. So what I'm looking at here in step 6 is, am I really convinced that my life run on my self-will is not a success? After looking at the specifics of my life and the way that I operate, it's a whole new level of surrender to self. And that's what I mean when I talk about it being now we're really taking the third step. And if you'll notice, if you put the third step prayer up next to the 7th step prayer, it's the same prayer. And some people talk about how the 3rd step prayer doesn't have an amen at the end and the 7th step prayer does. I don't know if that was in. Sometimes as I'm a studier of the big book and a big book thumper, big time. But sometimes I think I could just imagine Bill coming down here and going, guys, I didn't put an amen at the end of the 3rd step prayer because I forgot. Just relax. It doesn't have that much meaning. You guys are putting way more in it than I meant. I don't know. Maybe that's the case. Maybe it's not. I just think it's kind of funny sometimes. But maybe there is a good reason for that. Maybe Bill put the amen at the end of the 7th step prayer because now we're really taking the 3rd step. Whatever it is, it's just the way that it seems to me. So what we're really looking at in step 6 is powerlessness, a lack of power. I don't have the power to fix this stuff on my own. Here it is. Here's the list. I've done the work. The work is not in step 6. The work is in steps 4 and 5, 8 and 9, 10 and 11. This is where the work is. That's the work that I do. That's why step 6 is one paragraph and step 7 is just a prayer here in the book, because we don't need any more. We're not doing a lot. What we're doing here is just surrender. This is not my job. My job is to become aware, to admit that it's objectionable. God's job is to remove. And the reason for that is because I can't. The first time I took the 6th step, I wrote 100 pages. The first time I went through the steps was not out of the big book. And I wrote actually over 100 pages on step 6. It was an analysis of my character defects. And it was an interesting exercise, but it was no more effective in getting rid of the defects than just becoming aware of it and surrendering. As a matter of fact, it was much less effective. So this is not about me figuring out how to solve my defects. The way that I understand it today is I'm running on programs. I run on a set of programs that my subconscious operates on or my body operates on. It's like the mind is in the body and the body is running on the programs. And this is the way I react if I feel insulted. And this is the way I react if whatever. This is what I do when I'm overwhelmed. And it's just what I do. I'm running on my programs. And I can't think my way out of that. Especially if I'm asleep. My conscious mind is thinking about the past and the future and where I wish I was and all over the place. And presently in this moment, I'm running on programs. I don't have the power to think my way out of that. So what it comes down to in a lot of cases here, I'm going to read this and then point this part out. If we can answer our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. We've emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. What's going on with us not wanting to let go of everything? I don't want to let go of it. I want to manage it. That's what I want to do. Take it back to your drinking. When you're in that place where you're moving closer to a surrender to drinking, we don't want to give up drinking. We want to manage it. Same thing with these character defects. I don't want to give these things up. I really want to manage them. I want to do it my way. I want to hang on to this and use it when it helps, but I don't want to suffer the consequences when it doesn't work. So that's what I've got to get to. I've got to get to a place where I become convinced that I cannot manage these defects. Do I really want freedom, or do I just want to stop suffering the consequences? One of my favorite speakers, Bob B. from Minnesota, he described this as, he said, if you were to open up my brain, and I'm paraphrasing, I've said this so many times, I'll probably say it completely wrong. He said, if you were to open up my brain and look inside, you wouldn't see these things filed under problems. You would see them filed under answers. I have an ego that is designed to protect me from anything uncomfortable, from experiencing any pain. And I build up systems on how to protect myself. And those become my character defects. And I don't want to let that stuff go. Because if I let go of what protects me, then what am I left with? Well, I'm left with God. So this is when we really check and see, do I trust God? Do I rely on God? I can say it. I can talk about it. I can read about it. But am I willing to let go of my defects that have been protecting me? That's what it really comes down to. That's really the test. So do I really want freedom from the defect, or do I want to stop suffering the consequences? Do I want a new relationship with God, or do I want to continue to rely on myself and just not get into trouble? And I'll give you an example. I mean, dishonesty is really valuable to get me out of trouble, but it also gets me into trouble. Rage is very valuable to intimidate someone and to get my way, but it also ruins relationships. So I got to take an honest look at that stuff. Can I trust God to handle what I use rage to handle? Can I trust God that if I have to suffer the consequences of what I've done, I don't have to lie about it. I can just face the music and trust God through the process. So it really comes down to some real surrender and some real God reliance. And what I find myself with a lot of these defects in a dilemma. I can't live with them and I can't live without them. And that's what I'm left with. So I don't have the power to fix this stuff on my own. I think Einstein has a quote that says something like, you can't solve a problem with the same level of consciousness that created the problem. And that's what I'm living on, this lower level of consciousness, this basis of self-will. And that's what I can't change this from. I can't surrender a defect and control a defect at the same time. And God will always allow me to do that. God loves me so much that he gives me free will. God gives me free will to handle this in any way I choose. If I'd like to continue to try to control it, God will allow me to do that. If I would like to surrender it, God will take it. So that's what the question always comes down to. And my job in most of these cases is to stop obstructing the process. What I tend to do is take it back and try to do it my way. So if there's any time that I'm wondering why a defect is not being removed, it's because I haven't surrendered it. I'm just trying to stop it and do it in my own way. This is a deeply spiritual step to me. It's a personal spiritual journey with God, where I'm admitting to God who I really am, who I've been on a deep level, admitting some things that are really uncomfortable, like, God, this is who I've been. I can't be authentic with people because I think no one will like me. I would rather intimidate my wife than face our issues, things like that. Can I really go to God and lay that out and say, this is who I am, and open my heart, really open up and say, God, this is what I'm coming to you with. I feel like I don't deserve your love. And see, the thing is God knows me. God knows what's best for me. God knows how to put me to use. God's seen everything that I do, knows everything much, much more than me, much more than I even know about myself. Everything that I'm asleep to, God is not asleep to any of that. God's awake to all that and loves me unconditionally. And that's what I'm really going to. In my opinion, it's much more about forgiving myself and trusting God than asking for forgiveness. That's just my opinion. So can I really trust God and really rely on God? There's 4 questions that Charlie has me use when I take step 6. The first one is, what is it that's objectionable? That's question 1. What is objectionable? What am I taking into step 6? Is this stuff objectionable? And I'm putting that on paper. What is objectionable? The second question is, can I fix it on my own? And I want to look at my experience, not my thinking. Does my experience show that I can fix this on my own power? The third question is, am I willing to let God change me in whatever way he sees fit? There's that big surrender. It's not my job to figure this out. The level of consciousness I've been operating on cannot see the solution. God has a solution in store for these shortcomings that I can't see. I see a very narrow, limited point of view. There's a much bigger picture full of solutions that I can't see unless I surrender, open myself up to God and allow God to direct me in all these different directions that I can't see. And that's tough for a guy like me. I want to control everything. I want to keep a hand in it. Am I willing to let God change me in whatever way he sees fit? After that third question, then I do the 7th step prayer. And then after the prayer, the 4th question, how can I align myself with the process? That's a call for action or sometimes inaction to stop doing something. I'll give you an example. I just asked this guy if it was okay if I use this story. One of the guys that I work with read some inventory to me, and he was afraid that his girlfriend was cheating on him. And at the time, he didn't have a whole lot of evidence to support this, but he had a real strong fear that she was cheating on him. And he reads me this fear inventory, and he's trying to get free of this fear. That's what he's taken to God. This fear's eating him up. It's causing him to act in all kinds of ways outside his values. So he reads this inventory and he takes it to God. And when he gets to this question, here's what comes to him. To align myself with the process of God removing this fear, I've got to stop creating fake social media accounts so that I can follow her and see if she's communicating with guys. Now, doesn't that make sense that if I really want to get free of this, if I want to get free of this fear, I got to stop doing that kind of stuff. Because that's me putting my hand back in it. And God's saying, okay, do it your way. I love you so much, I will let you do it. And I hope it works. But if it doesn't, I'm here. And if you'll surrender it, I'll gladly remove it. Okay, so I want to kind of personalize this. I've got a piece of inventory here, and I'm going to read through the inventory real quick and get to what came out of 6 and 7. I'm a teacher. I used to be a teacher at a school for kids that are in trouble. They're all kicked out of school, and I taught high school math and then some other stuff. But in this summer school, I'm teaching a summer school class. This is a credit recovery summer school class with a lot of the students that I know, but my principal is not in summer school. Another principal has come over that doesn't really handle things the same way that we're used to handling things. we're pretty hard-nosed and strict, and we have a high level of accountability. And the principal coming in was more about, let's hug everybody and love them until they act right. Not that I would ever judge anyone. Okay, so here's the inventory. I'm resentful at my summer school class because they put in no effort, they're lazy, they don't listen and obey, and they're disrespectful. This affects my self-esteem. I need to be the authority figure to feel good about myself. It affects my pride. They make me look weak and incompetent, especially when I can't back up my threats with consequences. It affects my ambition. I want to be seen as the hero by my new principal because that's just how I am. I always want to be the hero. It affects my security. I need to be in control to feel secure. I need to be respected. I need to be right. It affects my personal relations. I become negative and a downer to students and coworkers. And it affects my pocketbook. I may need a job with the school my summer school principal works at in the future. If I look bad here, I might be less likely to get hired in the future. So I'm in a little dilemma. I can't go to him and complain too much because I might want to go to work for him someday. You can see my terrible dilemma. Where am I at fault? No, before I do that, I like to do this realization, this little piece between columns 3 and 4. I realize that my students are perhaps spiritually sick. They're frustrated with math and with school. They fail classes and they stay in trouble with their parents, with the school, and the law. They don't know how to express their feelings in a constructive way. All they know how to do is act out and protect their egos. They're a lot like me. So where am I at fault? I'm selfish. I'm concerned all about me, my ambitions, how I feel and how I look. I've completely forgotten about helping my students not only get their credits, but also overcome their fears and feel good about themselves. I've even gone as far as to hope they fail so I can be right and win. God put me in a position to serve, and I made it all about me. I've been dishonest. I've exaggerated my students' lack of effort to my coworkers. I'm trying to build allies, right? I'm in delusion that my students could or would show up any other way. I work with at-risk kids. I've been self-seeking. I've complained to coworkers. I've tried to be tough with my students and made threats instead of demonstrating an attitude of service. And I've been afraid. I'm afraid of looking incompetent, and I'm afraid of losing control. Okay, so what I wanted to get to is this. So here's what I took into the 6th step. I'm trying to maintain stage characters. I'm the tough guy. I'm the professional teacher. And I'm the cool teacher that everybody likes. Can you see how those are in conflict and how it's difficult to maintain all that? I want to be the tough guy who doesn't let anyone disrespect me. I want to be the cool teacher that the kids like. I want to be the good teacher who can handle my kids without involving my administrators. When my arrangements stay put and people do as I wish, the show would be great. And then I could go on and read the rest of page 61, and it all applies to me trying to manage and run the show. This stuff is all based on my spiritual malady, these deep down beliefs that I'm not enough, that I don't measure up, that I'm not worthy. How do I act based on that? I'll show you. I'll maintain control of this situation. I'll at all costs protect myself, even if that means hurting you in the process. Even if you're 15 years old and I'm 40 and I'm supposed to be your teacher. So the truth that God helped me to see in this process, God's already provided everything that I need. There's nothing to prove, nothing to win, nothing to be right about. There's so much to give. How can I serve? Who would God have me be? How can I hold my students accountable with love? Those are the questions I need to be asking. My harms are a negative attitude, complaining, being too tough on the kids, talking trash to my coworkers. And I came up with some amends that I owe. I have some corrective measures here to bring a positive attitude, enthusiasm, and gratitude to work, to pause and ask often, and to ask, how can I serve? So then later I had an experience. And this was inventory, as inventory often is. There have been many situations like this. It was a buildup. I kept finding myself in confrontation with these confrontational students. And here I am in someone's face and we're yelling at each other. And that's not, first off, I'm not effective. Second, I go home with no peace of mind. And that's not the way I want to live. So I did this inventory and really got in this process and started trying to surrender this stuff and allow God to change me. And here's what I found one day. I was coming in from lunch. This was after the regular school year had started. I was coming in from lunch and there had been some kind of drama in the cafeteria and my students were all over the place just talking about it and talking about it. And I tell them to get quiet and do what they're supposed to do. And one of my students just kind of laughed at me and ignored me. And that really pushes my buttons when you ignore me. I know through previous inventory that if you ignore me, to me, that's very disrespectful and I got to do something to protect myself. So and I started to get mad, but then I found myself, and this kid's got tattoos on his neck. He's got felonies. He's as big as I am. I call him out into the hall and he's ready. He's bowed up. He's ready for a confrontation. And here's what I find myself saying. And guys, this was not a plan. I find myself saying this to him. I said, hey, Preston, when you ignore me like that, I feel disrespected. And he just kind of put his head down and he goes, oh, Mr. Payne, I'm sorry. That's not what I'm trying to do. And that's all it took. A couple days later, I come into class and again, there's been some drama and it's loud. I ask the kids to get quiet. Guess who backs me up? This kid backs me up. He says, all right, everybody sit down. That's not me. When I feel disrespected, I act out based on self-will. If I think I'm in a position where I'm more powerful than you, I try to intimidate you. If I think I'm in a position where you're more powerful than me, I go an underhanded route to protect myself. In this situation, I got vulnerable and trusted God with the outcome. And I'm not saying that works every time. I'm just saying in that moment, I allowed God to direct me. I paused and asked for guidance because I could see that I was really agitated, really, about to act out. And that's what came of it. That's the results of this stuff. And over the next few years, I totally changed the way I approach my students. I still held them accountable. I still held them up to the rules, but I did it from a place of love and respect. And it not only was it more effective, but I experienced so much more peace of mind and so much more satisfaction and reward, and my career became so much more rewarding. So this is a process of growth. It's never done. The best case scenario in AA is that we continue to fall short and continue to grow. The worst case scenario is the next piece of work I do is on drinking. And I don't want the work to be on drinking. I want the work to be on living. If I continue to do the work on living, hopefully I won't have to go back and do the work on drinking. That's the idea. When I took the third step, I made a deal with God. I said, God, provide whatever I need to grow closer to you, whatever it is that I need. When I first took that step, I thought I was going to get the things that I need, the good things. What I didn't know is that whatever I need may be what I need to confront what I need to let go of and grow through. And a lot of times that's the stuff that I don't want to face up to. But that's the deal that I made. And then I can always go back and tie this into step one. I can either do the work to grow spiritually or die an alcoholic death. It's my choice. And I want to keep doing the work, grow or go, as I've heard said in the rooms. And today I choose to continue to grow. I love this process, and I appreciate you guys letting me do this. Thank you.